Hello, my name's Amy and welcome to another weekly writing vlog. And this is a vlog in which I am going to have to explain why I have already changed my writing schedule a whole 2 weeks into the start of the year. Now, if you watched my goals video from late December, I talked about my publishing schedule for 2022. My plans are to publish a book in the summer and then in late December or early January. And I've just had a book come out about a week and a half ago as well, so we're looking at a release every 6 months. So with that in mind, I set up a schedule of everything I was going to work on this year, month by month. And I was starting the year by working on the book that I'd been writing throughout December and a little bit at the end of NaNoWriMo. This was a fantasy novel that I was adapting from a novella, and I was hoping to have the first draft done by the end of February. Now, I got halfway into this first draft. I got to about 38,000 words and I was quite happy with that being the middle of the book. Some big plot events had just taken place. And then I put it aside. Now, I had to think long and hard about doing this. One of the reasons I actually set a publishing schedule for myself this year was because I wanted to find more discipline in my writing life. I've spent the last few years jumping around between too many projects, and whilst I do finish things and I do get books published, I felt I needed more structure. So I have to admit it doesn't feel great to have got to the middle of January and to have already upended that structure, which is essentially what I've done. But I do have good reasons for doing it, so let's talk about those. The first reason is a sort of practical, technical one. Now, all the fantasy books I'm working on at the moment are set in one world. They take place at various different times in this world's chronology. There are literally thousands of years between some of the series. But I realised that the book I was trying to draft really came at the end of an arc. There are 3 other series that kind of tell earlier parts of the story, and then the book I was trying to write is kind of a continuation of those 3 series, none of which is written yet. Now, I really thought I could work past this because the book I was writing only loosely follows the previous series. It takes place a long time after the events in some of the other books. It doesn't feature many of the same characters. There's just one recurring character who has lived for thousands of years. So I was pretty sure I could write this book anyway. And I could have carried on and finished the first draft and the book would have been fine. But I just kept thinking throughout the writing of it that I was missing something. And I think honestly what I'm missing is all the history and backstory and character growth that will come in the 3 series that precede it. If that had been the only stumbling block, honestly, I think I would have just carried on and written the book anyway. I could have made it less dependent on the earlier books. I could have made it stand alone and not tie into the wider history of the world quite as much. But I started thinking about something else, and that something is fear. When I look back at my publishing catalogue, I now have 11 books out. There is one thing that really stands out to me, and I've known this for a while. I do love the books I've published. I put absolutely everything into them and I make every single one as good as it can possibly be before publication. But they are, by and large, not the projects that I am the most passionate about. Some of my earlier books were published to learn the ropes, and whilst I am still proud of them, I always felt they were a bit of an experiment. And then I've written later series because I thought there was a market for them. And again, I'm really proud of them. They are very much my books and I put things that I love into them. They didn't really chase trends as much as they could have done, but they did come from a place of thinking about the market first and my passion as a writer second. And I realised with the book I was writing in December and was continuing in early January that I was doing the same thing again. Essentially, this book was pretty straightforward. It has similarities with things I've written before. It wasn't really pushing my writing very much. And I think it would have been a perfectly decent book, but it was all just a bit too easy. And I became very much aware that I was doing this because I was scared to push myself. I have so many other series waiting to be written. Some are very long, some are very complicated, some have individual books that will be 200,000 or 300,000 words long. And I've started lots of them and I haven't finished a single one, and I really have to put that down to being scared. I am scared of putting so much of myself into these books. I am scared of writing books that are so long and publishing series that are going to take me years and not knowing what the reader reaction will be. And in the face of all that, the book I had chosen to work on at the very start of the year was really just a reaction to that fear. I was picking the easiest possible project with the shortest volumes and the simplest plot, and the thing most like what I've written before. And as a result, honestly, it was just feeling a bit flat. I like to push myself as a writer, which is why I've planned so many big books and big series and complicated worlds. But the thing is, I start on these projects and never finish them. So whilst there are lots of projects I could write that would really push my boundaries and my skill level, I've never actually published any of them. And this is where we come to the book I have decided to work on instead. We will call this one Project Moon. It doesn't have a definite title yet. Now, Project Moon is not an overly complicated book on its own merits. It's relatively short, it's about 60,000 words, and it is already drafted, and I also have about half of the sequel. And I really love this book. I love the setting, I love the characters, and I love the way it ties into a really big, complicated arc within this fantasy world. And I think it's because I love it so much that I have continually put it on the back burner. I have essentially been scared to work on it because I am scared to publish it. I am worried that people are not going to like it when I've still got 5 more books in the series to write. And essentially I'm worried that something I have poured my heart and soul into, which I absolutely love with every fibre of my being, will go out into the market and fall completely flat. Now the thing is, this is a fear you can never really get around because it might happen. The book might flop, the entire series might flop, and the multiple other books and series that follow it might also flop. Not a single one of them might ever sell. They might get terrible reviews, or they might just not get bought at all. I've got to the point where that is a risk I am willing to take. That kind of rejection really does sting. I have been there before, and I think it's the fear of going there again which has put me off working on Project Moon. But I can't keep giving in to fear. I need to write the books and series that I am most passionate about. So that is what I'm working on right now. As I said, the book is already drafted, it's 60,000 words long, and I have now started the edits. I'm probably going to stick to my original publishing schedule, so even if it's ready in advance, I will hold off until the summer to release it, which may also give me a chance to get a bit further ahead with the sequel. So in some ways, that publishing schedule and my writing goals that I set out in that video a few weeks ago haven't changed that much. Certainly from an outsider's perspective, it might look that way at least. But there has been a lot going on up here as I come to terms with how this series might be received and facing up to the way I've allowed my schedule and my goals to be dictated by potential things going wrong in the future. On the plus side, although it's impossible for me to completely take my mind off what might happen when we come to releasing this book, I am really excited about working on it. I love it so much. So I think the next few weeks of work are going to be really enjoyable. we are again back in my filming spot. This week has been quite a journey and not in a good way. I started the vlog with a lot of big ideas and a lot of hope for my writing. I had switched writing projects and I was feeling really good about all the decisions I'd made. And all of that is still true. The writing is going okay, we will talk about that in a bit. But I am still sticking to that plan I made earlier in the vlog and I'm very happy with those decisions. But we had some not so great news early in the week. I think the day after I filmed that last clip. We last year bought a house which we run as an Airbnb and it came with a very large barn. Now we are hoping to turn this barn into an additional Airbnb let and also our home because at the moment we're living with family. Now in the UK, when you want to do a big building project like that, you have to apply for something called planning permission, and the planning officials will tell you whether you are allowed to undertake the work or not. It can be a very long and drawn out process. It's not cheap either. We've had an architect drawing up plans for the barn and we actually submitted them back in about October. Now we didn't know how the planning process was going to go. The barn had had planning permission on it before a few years ago, which we thought was pretty hopeful because the previous owner had had permission to convert it into 2 homes. So our plans weren't a huge deviation from his and our architect was pretty confident that we would get something passed. But the last few months have not really proved that at all. The difficulty is that the barn is now in a national park, which is a protected area of landscape, and it wasn't in a national park a few years ago. The boundaries of the park have changed, and whilst that's great for tourism and it brings more people into the area and it protects the landscape, it has made getting planning permission very difficult. Our original plans have not been officially turned down, but the planning officials made it pretty clear that they weren't going to accept them. And we got more bad news on that front this week. We had sent some revised plans and we pretty much got the same message back from the planning officials that they weren't going to accept the revised plans either. Which means we are in round 3 of new plans. We are waiting for the architect to draw some up, so that'll probably take a couple of weeks. But we have had to compromise significantly from what we had wanted to do with the barn. We didn't really think what we were asking for was unreasonable, but the planning officials have not seen it that way. But the thing is, for us, this isn't just a matter of a business proposition, converting a barn to sell, and it's not as easy as just moving on somewhere else if we don't get the planning permission. We have put pretty much every penny we have into buying the property and setting up the Airbnb business. Now, of course, converting a barn doesn't come for free, but it's still going to be cheaper than buying a house elsewhere because we'll be doing a lot of the work ourselves. But if we can't get the planning permission, we can't convert the barn, which means we can't live on site with our animals and our business. And honestly, I'm not sure what we do at that point because we can't really afford to buy much else in the area. It's an incredibly expensive area of the country, as a lot of the rural northwest is. And whilst we could afford to rent, there is literally nothing available. We've actually applied to a school for our daughter to start in September, which means really to get her into that school, we need to be within the catchment area, and there is nothing to rent. And there may well be nothing to rent for the next 6 months. Rental properties in the area come onto the market so incredibly rarely. So this week we found ourselves in a pretty scary position. We are on the verge of having our plans turned down, which means we will end up with nowhere to live, with no ability to afford anywhere different that isn't the barn, with our daughter potentially getting into a school that we live an hour away from. And honestly, if the planning permission does end up being rejected, I just don't know where we go from here. Now, obviously none of this is writing related, but I've described all this because it gives you a sense of my state of mind over the past week. There were days in the middle of the week when I was gripped by absolute despair. I could not see a way forward. I was considering whether we were going to have to sell the entire property in the business and start from scratch. And we've done that once in the last couple of years, so we really didn't want to do it again. There was a time when it was starting to feel like the only option. Now, I'm hoping we've moved away from that point. I'm still hopeful we will find some solution and some compromise with the planning officials. But it has been a really tough week. I haven't written a lot. I haven't filmed because I just could not face sitting down in front of the camera. I haven't been sleeping well, and on top of all that, I caught a cold off my daughter who picked it up at nursery. So it's been one of the most stressful weeks I've had in a while. I will say I am ending the week on a bit of a better note. I think when life becomes really stressful, I start focusing on the things that I can control. And writing, because I am self-published, is one area that I have complete control over. So whilst I haven't spent a huge amount of time on my book, I have been thinking about the future. And I've actually been devising a bit of a marketing plan for myself. Obviously, part of being self-published, or in fact published with any kind of publisher these days, is doing some kind of marketing for yourself. And I have done all sorts of things over the years. I've worked on my newsletter, I've run ads, I've tried social media. But the problem is I have done all of these things piecemeal. I will do them for 2 or 3 months at a time and then lose interest, or they will stop being as effective and I will scrap them, I'll move on to something else. And I've never really devised a comprehensive strategy to pull it all together. I started thinking about all the things that I've been meaning to do for ages and kept putting off. I've got some prequels and sequels, just short things, short stories or novellas that I want to be able to give away for free for my various series. I know my newsletter needs a revamp. I think my website needs a revamp. And a lot of these jobs are not very appealing when the alternative is sitting down and writing, but I need to do them. So I've been starting to make a plan for fitting them into my life and finally getting them finished. So that is where we are wrapping up the week. Honestly, nothing about this week went to plan. My writing fell by the wayside because I was just so stressed about other life things. But I have started to regain a bit of a sense of hope and of control over the last couple of days. To be honest, I think the next few weeks are going to be a bit of a roller coaster. The barn conversion is just taking over my life. And once we get out of January, the Airbnb will be opening up to guests again. We've got a very busy spring ahead, which is one silver lining. We've got loads of bookings lined up for this year, which is a really good position to be in. But there is a lot of uncertainty and it's kind of scary. But I'm trying to move forward. We are making plans for the future and for the barn. And I'm also making plans for the future of my writing. Now, I know this has been probably a shorter vlog than usual and a very chatty one, but I am going to wrap things up here. This week has been such a strange, stressful roller coaster that I think it's probably best to end on a high. I will be back soon with another writing vlog. Hopefully there will be good news on the barn front over the next few weeks. And hopefully in the next few vlogs I will actually have more writing to report. That would be nice. So I'm going to take my own advice this time and keep writing. I'll see you next time.